When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
I'm going to begin with this Hockey Canada scandal. The Hockey Canada scandal has gripped the nation. We've seen the updates on the story. An alleged group assault by some members of Canada's World Junior Hockey team took place back in 2018. And this week, of course, the victim did come forward, did an interview, didn't say much, but did speak to the Globe and Mail. And that has pushed this story forward as well this week. Now, since the start, if you've been listening to the show, we've touched on the Big Five and some other segments here. And I really felt we have been missing the point of what's at play here, especially when it comes to teens, relationships, and sex. Dr. Laurie Betito is with us, and I'm so happy she is with us this morning. She has such a unique and I think sober perspective on all of these kinds of issues. A clinical psychologist, specialty in sex therapy, and she is with us this morning. Dr. Laura, I thank you. Dr. Laurie, I thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Elias.
So I remember, over a year ago, you came on to talk about that Canadians draft pick story, right? Everyone losing their mind over it at the time. And I really appreciated your tone and what you brought to the discussion on that. This time around, I've been confounded here because in this story about this Hockey Canada scandal and this whatever took place in 2018 and so many differing takes and so many differing outlines of what happened that day, to me, the first thing that came to my mind is we need to start having a discussion about 18-year-olds even doing consent or not, right? Even if it's fully consensual, we're not even talking about what 18-year-olds are getting in their brain as something that is normal. So Dr. Laurie, when you see this story, right? Hockey Canada scandal, what goes through your mind?
Well, right away, what comes to my mind is how we don't understand consent. It seems like we don't really know what consent is, and young people don't seem to know what consent is. And I think we need to clarify that a little bit. And, I do talk to a lot of young people about consent because I think it's one of the most important things. But in this story, there was alcohol involved. When alcohol is involved, you cannot consent. So even though the person may have been under the influence and may have nodded okay or what have you, I think legally you're not really able to consent if you're under the influence. Consent has to be enthusiastic, and it has to be all along the process. So if a person, for example, agrees to have sex or consents to sex with one person, that doesn't mean they've agreed to have sex with multiple people, right? Or if they have agreed to one act, they haven't agreed to all the other acts. So I think it's understanding that, but it may go deeper than that in terms of how youth are learning about sex and relationships. And that's far more problematic when you don't have a lot of these discussions in schools, for example, and that when they don't start young.
So I want to ask you something here, Dr. Laurie. So, with what you're saying about alcohol and consent, I think all of our listeners now are listening to the radio and they're saying to themselves, oh my goodness, I have had unconsensual sex then, right? Because who hasn't had sex where alcohol has been involved at one point by one party, right? So can we dive into that a little bit more? Like, we need to be having serious discussions if that's the case.
Well, yes, we do need to be having serious discussions because what ends up happening, and sometimes it's you're under the influence and then you regret something that you consented to, let's say, under the influence, and then you have regrets, and then what happens? Then then somebody may get accused of non-consensual sex when they thought it was consensual, but it was under the influence of alcohol. So the best is don't have sex with someone who's inebriated. That's really the bottom line, because you could get potentially in a whole lot of trouble. It's very murky, obviously, because people have asked, well, what if both people are under the influence, right?
Yeah.
And
which is most often the case, I would imagine.
Right. But again, every case is different and has to be looked at within the context.
Okay.
So, but it's not a good idea to engage in sexual activity when alcohol is involved, and not just for the consent aspect, but for for safety. We tend to not protect ourselves as well when we are under the influence. We tend to not make great decisions under the influence. So I think that's a really important point.
We're with Dr. Laurie Betito, clinical psychologist, specialty in sex therapy. So, Dr. Laurie, I want to read you a couple text messages here, and I'd love to know your take, because we were discussing this on the program yesterday. This story, the whole notion of what happened. And by the way, we don't even have to talk about this specific case, right? Because we actually don't know the facts, right? And we hear there's video of this, and there's a settlement, of course. So we don't actually know. So we can just talk about just any scenario involving teenagers here. But here is a text from listeners when we were talking about this yesterday, taking issue with something I'd said. Elias, you are so wrong. Consent? No woman wants 8 men. Elias, you really, really believe, another text messenger, you really, really believe 7 or 8 young guys with 1 female is consent. Do you believe that? So the question is here, can you, Dr. Laurie, can a woman ever consent? Ever, ever, ever? Consent, and there's no alcohol involved, whatever it is, can a woman ever consent to sex with multiple men, multiple partners at the same time?
I mean, in theory, yes, but in a situation where she is confronted, she's alone as a lone woman, confronted with 8 men with very little exit potential, right? Maybe lots of fear. She's powerless with 8 men. That's part of the problem. So she may, in a situation like that, I can imagine a woman kind of letting it happen just to like not having the power to do anything. Which is obviously quite problematic. That part is very problematic. And, sometimes I think about the influence also of pornography on what young people are learning, because, I'm sure they see group sex in pornography. Do they think this is normal? Do they think this is what all women want? Do they, what are the assumptions here? Is this where they're learning about what women want, what men want?
And I think this is being lost on some people that are older here. When I was in high school, if I wanted access to adult content, I had to go to like a stranger's apartment building and buy like a VHS cassette from a shady guy. Okay. And then that cassette that I bought would be considered wholesome by today's standards. And then what's available on the internet today is nothing like that. The categories that are on these websites, Dr. Laurie, and I think we're failing to understand that.
Right. And it's also it's so available, right? So young people, like research shows that by the time a kid reaches 13 years old, they have more than likely been exposed to pornography, which is why I think it's really important that sex education has a component of what we call porn literacy, so that children know this is not real sex. That's like learning how to drive by watching The Fast and the Furious. Mm-hmm. This is not how you learn about sexuality. So bottom line for me, from where I sit, is that we need far more education, ongoing, all grade levels, and it has to be ongoing. And these discussions must be had. That includes porn literacy, that includes lots of discussions about healthy relationships, that includes discussions about what consent is. Remember, consent is enthusiastic consent. Submitting, saying yes under pressure is not consent. That's submission. That is not consent. So there are lots of factors here that need to be taught. So
with what we just discussed about the adult content that's available to people, right? Does it surprise you that 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, we're seeing stories like this? Yeah, even with consent, are you seeing this maybe in your practice about younger people and how they are viewing what sex is?
Look, I don't think it's across the board. I do think, though, that many older teens understand that this is fantasy, and understand that this is not real life. And sometimes it's a rude awakening when they get into real life and realize, oh, women don't like that, or they don't like this, or I don't have to look like this. So, but for some, with early exposure and continuous exposure, plus the lack of education to counterbalance that, then we get into situations. Sexual assault has been going on for eons, though. So let's not make that this is anything new. This has been going on for a long time. I'm just glad we're talking more about it.
And last question here, and you may not have an answer for this, right? But in your opinion, is this a hockey issue or a society issue?
It's not a hockey issue.
Yeah, well,
per se. Yeah. It might be a sports culture issue, which has to be addressed as well. But I'm no expert in this area to be able to comment on what goes on in these types of organizations. But there is a culture of this that needs to be addressed for sure.
Dr. Laurie, I always appreciate talking to you. Thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
You got the podcast, right?
Absolutely.
Give it the plug. Give us the plug.
It is Passion with Dr. Laurie and John Paul, and it's available on all podcast platforms.
That's the one and only Dr. Laurie Betito.